A man keeps his daughter locked away in a grimly sophisticated cellar for 24 years. In that time, he tortures her, rapes her, and fathers her 7 children. It goes without saying that this is the face of a monster.
A father who kept his daughter locked away in a secret chamber for 24 years. The poor girl was just 18 when the horror began, and over the years she had 7 children. 1 died, 3 were kept prisoner down in the cellar, and unbelievably, the others were adopted by the father and lived openly upstairs as his grandchildren.
What punishment do you think monsters like this deserve? Join us as we recount this unbelievable story and explain why the White Torture Room is the perfect place for monsters like Josef Fritzl. Welcome to the White Room. White is often associated with purity, perfection, and, for the most part, all things good. So how can this possibly have morphed into a symbol of immense torment? Better yet, how dangerous can a white room really be? To begin with, the concept of a white torture room was inspired by a phenomenon known as extreme sensory deprivation. Now, you might be thinking of those isolation tanks that induce a meditative or enlightened state. Well, don't think that, because there is no escape pass with the White Room. Once you are in, you are in. Now let's enter the White Room. Soon as you step in, the first thing that hits you is the blinding white lights that cover the walls and corners. Next, you will find that the bed frame, blankets, even the toilet in the corner are all white. Even your food will be white. Yes, plain white rice. There are, of course, no windows. That means no sunlight, no chance to watch human interaction, no chance to see anything that could give you hope of a way out. Now, if you are an introvert, you are probably thinking that you got this. While this does not seem like torture right now, let us assure you that you don't got this. First reason you don't, the blinding lights. Those lights don't go off at night, so you can't have the semblance of a good night's rest. The lights stay on 24/7, and as bright as they are, they will never get dim. Because that, in fact, is the point. This constant illumination disrupts your natural sleep cycle. Remember, your brain associates bright lights with staying awake. Even if you wanted to, you probably would not be able to. After a few hours, restlessness will set in. This is where the next problem comes: boredom. It goes without saying that people yearn for stimulation. And in the outside world, we have got social media to cater to this need. Coming into the White Room, you definitely would not have the luxury of a phone or anything like that. As you can imagine, cutting them off completely is like quitting drugs or smoking abruptly. The symptoms of withdrawal are inevitable. To combat this boredom, you will start counting things, internalizing, and talking to yourself. In this state, your brain may even conjure an imaginary character, just to reassure you and make you feel less alone. While this may work for some time, you will start to feel the drawbacks soon enough. You see, with each day being the same and not being able to sleep as long as your body needs, you will start to feel the world closing in. The more you try to look inward and reminisce, the harder it will hit you that you can't actually replace the social interaction that your mind needs. This isolation is only the beginning, and it will only lead to more horror. The relentless brightness of the lights accentuates the passage of time in this white world. You have no sense of time, and this further solidifies the mental panic that your suffering may not have an end. This is when hallucinations come in. It will start with the lights, then lines and shapes. At this stage, you will experience full-blown hallucinations. You have no control over what you will see and when you will see them. We are talking schizophrenic, full-blown hallucinations. This, of course, can be scary. Don't want to take our word for it? Take it from Iranian writer Ibrahim Nabavi, who was forcibly imprisoned and tortured at the Evin prison for over 3 months. In an interview afterward, he stated that the worst part of being in solitary white rooms was that it stopped him from feeling free. Even after he was released, the trauma from bearing such experiences caused him to not be able to sleep without sleeping pills. In his own words, it was terrible. The loneliness never leaves you. Long after, you are afraid of every door that is closed on you. It affects you. While we would like to say that nobody deserves this type of treatment, we also realize that we cannot. Evil exists in this world, and people like Josef Fritzl are proof of that. This man somehow managed to maintain a respectable public image, but in reality, was a monster behind closed doors. On the 27th of April 2008, his horrific actions would come to light, and it would send shockwaves around the world. His story begins in the quaint town of Amstetten in Austria. He was born on the 9th of April 1935 and lived a very ordinary life. Notably, his childhood featured a dominating and abusive mother. She would regularly beat him up, and this lasted until he was around 15 years old, when he finally stood up against her violent attacks. Psychologists in his case believed this was when he changed, and the earliest signs of his own psychosexual behaviors emerged. By 1851, he was 16 when he left his home in Amstetten and moved to the Austrian city of Linz. He studied to become an engineer and would later meet his wife, Rosemary, in the year 1956. By September 1963, they would already have 3 children, 2 daughters, and a son. He had an outstanding career at the time. Engineers were always in demand as a result of the concluded war. So you can see how the timid boy grew into a confident and domineering man. On the 8th of April 1966, the Fritzls welcomed their 4th child, Elizabeth. If there was ever a haunting sign of the horror to come, it would manifest just a year later. Fritzl was convicted of rape after following a young mother home to her house and raping her at knife point next to her child. Fritzl received only 18 months for the rape of this young mother. Even worse, this did not stick on his record permanently because, under Austrian law, an offender's record is wiped clean after 15 years. After his sentence, he returned home to a wife who had forgiven and stood by him. By 1972, the Fritzl family had grown. 4 girls and 3 boys. With 7 children, Josef Fritzl decided to expand the family home where he grew up. In addition to a new roof terrace, Fritzl also obtained permission to build a rather large cellar under the house. By September 1981, Elizabeth started spreading her wings. She was going to school and also had a job at a petrol station on the side. The older she got, the more independent she wanted to become. Unfortunately for her, Fritzl was becoming obsessed with her and making plans to keep her to himself. In time, he began to reveal his intentions by leaving pornographic magazines under her pillow. By the 28th of August 1983, she was done. She ran away from home. Sadly, she was found by the police in Vienna and sent back home, right into the waiting arms of her abuser. The tight leash on her afterward was the least of her problems because by the summer of 1983, the cellar was completed. On the 28th of August 1984, Josef Fritzl lured 18-year-old Elizabeth into the cellar of the house. When her back was turned, he drugged and handcuffed her. When she came to, she was forced to write a letter saying she had run away and joined a cult. Fritzl then drove 100 miles out to another town so he could post the letter home. Elizabeth never saw daylight again.
For the first 4 years, Elizabeth was alone, except when her father came down and raped her.
He would beat, emotionally torture her, and even worse, rape her repeatedly. The result? 7 children.
Over the next 20 years, she had 7 of his children, all born in the cellar. Michael died soon after birth and was incinerated by Fritzl at the house. Bizarrely, of the 6 remaining children, 3 were chosen to live upstairs. The others, Felix, now 5, Stefan, 18, and Kirsten, 19, were condemned to life in the dungeon. And it was down here that Elizabeth tried to give them as normal a life as possible.
Fast forward to March 2008, the oldest child, 19-year-old Kirsten, became seriously ill. The typical aspirin medication was not working. Weeks later, on the 19th of April, she was taken to the hospital, and this was the act that opened up the can of worms.
Doctors were immediately suspicious. The young girl was as white as a sheet from severe vitamin D deficiency, a total lack of sunlight. Police were baffled. Who was she? Where was her mother?
By Sunday, the 27th of April, news of Elizabeth's 24 years of sexual enslavement had spread like wildfire. But it wasn't until the 16th of March 2009 that Josef Fritzl was brought to trial. He was charged with rape, enslavement, incest, and the murder of one of the children he had conceived with his daughter. Elizabeth's initial testimony was video recorded, and this was used as evidence throughout the trial. By the age of 42, Elizabeth Fritzl had spent more than half of her life in captivity, without sunlight, and living under grim conditions. Josef Fritzl was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. He got 20 years for enslavement, 15 years for rape, 10 years for deprivation of liberty, 5 years for coercion, and 1 year for incest. Do you think this is justice enough? Fritzl will die in prison, but for Elizabeth and her children, they have to deal with pain for even longer. He was a tyrant who ruled over their lives for years. The damage is incomprehensible, and we believe he deserves the White Room.